There's a very specific kind of silence at 3 a.m. It's the silence where your body is in bed, but your brain is doing algebra. One person is lying there staring at the ceiling after buying a $500,000 starter home. And they're not thinking about pride. They're not thinking about adulthood. They're not thinking about building equity. They're thinking, okay, if the school wants $35 for the field trip and the water bill hits Friday and the car needs tires next month, can we still do that? That is not wealth. That is a financial stress simulator with a front lawn. Now, cut to someone else. Same city, same age, same income range, but they rent. They have $20,000 in cash reserves. Real, boring, unsexy cash. Walking away money, emergency money, breathing money. And that person sleeps like a baby. Because when your housing choice leaves you with margin, your nervous system notices. So let's kill the dumbest cliche in personal finance right now. Renting is throwing money away. No, being house poor is throwing your life away, one stressed out heartbeat at a time. If your housing payment turns every grocery run into a board meeting, every coffee into a moral dilemma, every school expense into a mini crisis, congratulations, you didn't buy security, you bought a nicer version of panic. And a lot of people stay in that panic because of what I can only call real estate Stockholm syndrome. They've been told for so long that buying equals winning that they start defending the thing that is crushing them, not because the math works, because the myth is socially approved. Today, we're going to walk from social pressure to financial logic. And once you see the numbers clearly, you may realize that renting isn't failure. For a lot of people, it's freedom.
Let's do the brutal math. A recent CBS breakdown put a $500,000 mortgage at about $2,994.54 a month on a 30-year loan at 5.99%. And that's before taxes, insurance, and PMI. In other words, before reality shows up. CBS News. And that's the first scam in the conversation. People compare rent to principal and interest like that's the whole story. It isn't. Homeownership has a pile of costs that never build equity, what economists would call unrecoverable costs, money that leaves your account and never comes back. Let's start with PMI. Private mortgage insurance is what you pay when you don't put 20% down, which means if you're not already wealthy enough to arrive with a suitcase full of cash, you get fined for the inconvenience. That's why I call PMI what it often feels like, the poverty tax. NerdWallet cites typical PMI costs for conventional loans at roughly 0.46% to 1.50% of the original loan amount per year on a large mortgage, which can easily land in the $200 to $400 per month range, and sometimes higher depending on credit, down payment, and debt ratios. NerdWallet. Now add the 1% rule. Fannie Mae's homeowner guidance says a common rule of thumb is to budget 1 to 4% of the home's value per year for maintenance and repairs. On a $500,000 house, that means $5,000 a year at the low end, about $417 a month for the privilege of not being surprised when the water heater explodes at 11 p.m. Fannie Mae. Then add property taxes and homeowners insurance. These are the silent killers because people mentally file them under part of the payment, which makes them feel harmless. They're not harmless, they're just recurring. One recent housing analysis found that taxes and insurance now account for about 21% of monthly mortgage payments across U.S. metros on average, and in some places they can eat up more than 1/3 of the payment. Neighbors Bank. Do the math on that. If principal and interest are about $2,995 and taxes plus insurance consume something like a 21% share of the total payment, you're already looking at roughly another $800 a month just for escrow-style costs. That's before repairs, before HOA, before the weird leak behind the wall that turns into a 4-figure personality test. CBS News, Neighbors Bank. And those costs are not trending down because you're a good person. Realtor.com reported median monthly escrow expenses for taxes and insurance rising from $334 to $419 between 2019 and 2024, while homeowners insurance alone jumped from $91 to $128 a month, roughly a 41% increase. Realtor.com. The U.S. Treasury has also warned that homeowners insurance is becoming more costly and harder to obtain, with premiums rising faster than inflation and with especially painful spikes in higher risk areas. U.S. Treasury. So when somebody says, at least you're building equity, ask a better question. How much of that monthly burn is actually equity and how much is just wealth destruction with cup holders? Because a house can absolutely become wealth destruction with cup holders when the payment owns you.
Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Meet the Johnson family. They make $160,000 a year. On paper, they are what America likes to call upper middle class. Respectable income, good jobs, nice neighborhood. Doing well. And yet, they feel broke. Why? Because their housing cost has metastasized into a lifestyle hostage situation. Mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, utilities, the occasional repair, the appliance that dies right after you finally start feeling okay again. By the time all of it hits, housing is eating something like 46% of take-home pay. So now they live in a house they technically own, but emotionally, they rent their entire nervous system from the mortgage company. They don't feel rich, they feel trapped. They have the psychological need to occasionally leave the house, take the kids somewhere, get dinner, breathe like a normal human being, but every unexpected expense becomes a crisis. A dentist bill is a crisis, a car repair is a crisis, a school trip is a crisis, a plane ticket for a family emergency is a crisis. And that's the part nobody posts on Instagram. Because culturally, the house reads as success. But inside the house, the family is doing survival-based calculations all day long. That is the illusion of wealth. The bank really owns the house for 30 years. The owner is basically a tenant with a lawnmower and a repair liability. That line sounds harsh, but think about it. If you stop paying, whose house is it? Exactly. And unlike a renter, this owner gets the additional luxury of paying for the roof, the plumbing, the HVAC, the insurance shocks, the tax reassessment, and the mystery smell in the basement. That's not sovereignty. That's leverage wearing a patriotic costume. Now, let's talk about what renters often have that homeowners underestimate: margin. Margin is what happens when your monthly life costs leave enough space for your future to exist. And financially, margin matters more than granite countertops. Here's the opportunity cost question nobody asks hard enough. What if, instead of locking up $100,000 in a down payment in closing costs and furniture and all the little starter home cash leaks, you pushed that financial boulder into a low-cost index fund? What if, instead of feeding every spare dollar into maintenance and escrow creep, you built liquidity first? Because the first $20,000 matters. That's walking away money. That's the amount that lets you negotiate with an employer differently. That's the amount that lets you leave a bad apartment, a bad boss, a bad city, or a bad relationship without your whole life collapsing. After that, $100,000 matters. That's where money starts doing more of the heavy lifting. That's where you begin to feel gravity working in your favor instead of against you. And this is where the myth breaks apart. Homeowners love to say, but I have equity. Okay, can you use it without selling, refinancing, borrowing against it, paying fees, or taking on more risk? If not, then a lot of that wealth is a framed screenshot, useful on paper, harder in real life. A renter with cash and investments has liquid freedom. A homeowner with no reserves and a massive fixed payment has equity they can't comfortably access. Those are not the same thing. One gives you options. The other gives you a story you hope the market keeps validating. And if you think this is just theory, look at current metro data. Different studies use different methods, but the pattern is clear. Location matters, and full costs matter even more. Empower's metro analysis found that in the 50 largest U.S. metros, buying was cheaper in 23 cities while renting was cheaper in 27, with huge local differences. In San Jose, renting beat buying by about $4,094 a month. In Seattle, by $1,328. In Austin, by $444. Meanwhile, in places like Chicago, Miami, and Pittsburgh, buying could still come out ahead on a monthly principal and interest comparison. But a broader lending tree analysis using full monthly owner costs for mortgaged homes found that renters paid less than owners in all 100 of the largest U.S. metros, with owners paying about 36.9% more per month nationally. In San Francisco, the monthly cost gap was about $1,565. In New York, owners paid about 76.1% more than renters. That's not a contradiction. That's the whole lesson. If your argument for buying only works when you ignore taxes, insurance, maintenance, and friction, then the argument is not strong. It's just selective storytelling. And selective storytelling is how people become prisoners in their own home. Because once your payment structure becomes too heavy, you can't risk income disruption. You can't take the lower paying job with more upside. You can't leave the manager you hate. You can't move for a better opportunity. You can't breathe. The renter with cash can. That is not failure. That is bargaining power. So, here's the permission slip a lot of people need. You do not have to play this game on schedule. You do not have to buy because your cousin bought. You do not have to buy because your parents think rent is dead money. You do not have to buy because social media turned square footage into a personality trait. The new American dream should not be granite countertops, fake wood paneling, and a payment so large it turns your calendar into a threat. The new American dream is breathing room. It's margin. It's mobility. It's an emergency fund. It's being able to lose a job without losing your mind. It's the luxury of not calculating the price of coffee. It's waking up and realizing your life is not one big spreadsheet full of fear. If buying a home fits your numbers, your time horizon, your savings, and your temperament, then great, buy it. But if renting preserves your sanity, protects your liquidity, and lets you invest consistently, then renting is not what you do because you're behind. It might be what you do because you can count. And that's the real shift. The goal is not to win a cultural trophy. The goal is to make decisions based on math instead of emotion. Because the real flex is not saying, I own a house. The real flex is saying my money gives me options. And options are what freedom looks like when you grow up.